Real Estate Pro Talk is a live radio talk show dedicated to educating its listeners on the entire spectrum of real estate matters. Part of the American dream is owning a home or investment property, or perhaps even becoming a real estate agent yourself. Paul Vanas and his team of real estate professionals have over 250 combined years of experience in the industry. In other words, we can make it happen for you. Why go down the road less traveled when we can put you directly on the real estate superhighway? Whether buying or selling in today's complicated real estate market, or if you just need advice about jumping into the real estate business for a career change, you'll need a decisive edge based on experience. Call Paul Vanas at 401-265-6144 for a free, no-obligation consultation. That's Paul Vanas at 401-265-6144.
Good afternoon. My name is Paul Vanas, and welcome to Real Estate Pro Talk. This is a real estate-oriented program which will cover a variety of topics every Friday afternoon from 3 to 4 p.m. here on WOON Radio. Some of the topics we'll be talking about during our time together is how to buy and sell a home, how to choose a real estate agent, how to choose a mortgage broker, flipping real estate, creative financing, private mortgages, how to buy a property with an IRA, and finally, how to develop a piece of land to turn it into your future dream home or sell a new construction home. I've been in the real estate business coming up on 40 years now, of which I own a real estate brokerage company, a real estate school, and a land development company. So all of my knowledge that I'm going to try to impart to you today is based on my personal experiences, along with the continuing education classes that we teach real estate brokers and agents. The goal in doing this is so you'll have the information when you meet a seasoned broker, and that way you'll know exactly what they're talking about, and they'll be impressed with you as well. You're welcome to call us today at 401-766-1240 if you have any questions, and we have a variety of subjects we'll be discussing today. Today, I'm happy to have a guest with me, Jeannie Elson-Gordon. Say hello, Jeannie.
Hello.
Jeannie's a local gal. She comes from North Smithfield, and she's been in the real estate business how many years now? 30 years. Wow.
Right behind you.
You've sold a few houses. But more importantly, Jeannie is also an instructor at our school, and she teaches the real estate pre-license classes and the continuing education classes to existing agents. We like to have Jeannie talk to you today about some of the qualifications of becoming a real estate agent, and in doing so, you'll learn. If you're interested in getting into the business, we can help you and direct you what company you'd like to join, depending on what your goals are, and. Also, we're going to talk a little bit for the first half of the show today about agency and how to represent a buyer and how to represent a seller. So that way, if you're thinking of buying and selling, you'll know exactly what your agent should be doing for you. So, Jeannie, again, welcome back. I think your microphone was off, so you might want to say hello again.
Well, hello there. How is everybody?
I'm doing. I have operator error here. I'm new to the control panel here, so there's a bunch of buttons, and I'll eventually learn the ropes. Jeannie, tell me a little bit about yourself. How did you get into the real estate business?
I came into real estate. I'd always wanted to do real estate, but I came in through accounting. I know that sounds strange, but I did accounting for a contractor and got the real estate bug and took the class and started to sell his properties and realized I was liking real estate more than accounting. And it was me and the dog, and I didn't think we'd be homeless, so I quit the job.
Really good for you.
So,
and it's been 30 years since
yes,
that happened?
Yes, it has.
Wow. Now, did you jump in full-time or part-time first? Or
I did jump in full-time after I got my experience selling his new construction homes.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
So
it was a leap of faith.
I'm sure. I mean, it's just like opening a business. It's at first you have no customers or clients, and then of course you have to build the customer and client base up over the years, and hopefully it's a lot of return business, and you have to build confidence in people.
I didn't know I shouldn't jump in full-time.
Well, the funny thing is, I basically did the same thing, and only I was too dumb to know at that time the market was in the tank in the early 80s, so that probably wasn't the time to jump in. But, it's like the story of the bumblebee who has wings, and the wings can't support the bumblebee, but the bumblebee doesn't know it.
It flies, yes.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So when you started off in basically new construction sales.
Yes, I was lucky in that one of his friends gave me a development in Rehoboth, so I was selling raw land, and I had 28 house lots to sell, and I was working with the builders. I didn't get paid by the builders, but I was gaining experience working with the builders and helping my clients when they bought the land, they would choose their homes.
Wow.
So that was exciting.
Well, that's great too, because most agents take years to learn new construction. It's usually just the opposite. They sell a house for someone and they get into the business, and they may sell a house to a family member or sell a house for a family member. And then after a period of years goes by, they hook up with a builder, and the builder will, teach them about, the different facets of construction. So you really did it the hard way first.
I always do things the hard way.
Well, that's great. That's great. No, because it takes a while to get a good new construction base, because I was a new construction agent as well, but I didn't jump in immediately as a new construction agent. It took me a few years to develop that and learn all the, if someone says, well, how much is it to put a plug in this room? At first I didn't know, and then eventually it was like $75. Mm-hmm. So you could go around the room, count the plugs, and extra plugs are $75. So that's great. Tell me, Jeannie, you've been doing this a long time. You're working with buyers and sellers right now, and you have a busy schedule. What are the market conditions that
They're
you see?
really very good. They're not. The high end is, I think, slower than we like, but the first-time home buyers, they're out there. They want to buy, and problem is we can't get those intermediate buyers to move up. So, but I think it's really a good market, and I happen to love first-time home buyers. I love the excitement of it. So I'm very busy.
I see.
So, but I would say all in all, agents that are working, and we all know that some work and some don't, but those that are working are probably going to have one of their better years.
Really? Do you see the market being there's buyers across the whole spectrum, obviously, but are there more first-time home buyers now than there are the move-up people, the people that want to go from the smaller house to the bigger house?
I think there are, but maybe it's just what I work with.
I see.
But I do think there's more first-time buyers. I think people want to get out of apartments and condos, and they want homes with yards and the ability to do things in their yard, which you can't do in an apartment or in a condo.
Well, that's a good point. So they're buying right now. Are they primarily buying single family or in condos, or do you see many first-time home buyers jumping into the multis? Because we had Bethany Levin on here last week and from North Point Mortgage, and we were talking a little bit about mortgage financing, and the trend we talked about. Like the trend years ago was to buy a multi, and then eventually you live in the multi for so many years, and then buy a single family. However, that kind of went away for a little while. Everyone, I don't know if the '80s did that with the me generation or whatever. Everyone wanted to jump right into the single family. Mm-hmm. But as Bethany and I discussed last week, I find a lot of people are going back to the old way.
They are. A lot of people need the income from the other units in order to qualify for a house. So they are going back to buying multis in order to qualify, and hopefully they keep them, because it's always good to keep an investment. But an awful lot of people are jumping into the multis, and that's making multis just like gold. Really? If you happen to get a listing for a multifamily, it does not hang around. Especially
one with a lot of bedrooms. If you have a 3-bedroom multi per floor, those are always the primary.
Yeah.
Now, if do you see many people right now selling, like older folks retirement age. I shouldn't call older. Older is a definition
did you
that
see the
goes
color
up
of
as
my
I
hair?
get right. When 30 years ago, someone who was 55 was old, and now that I'm over 55, I think 55 is the new 45, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
But anyway, do you see a lot of these people scaling down in property, like they're selling the big 4-bedroom house and they're kind of done with it, or do you see them kind of staying in those houses for a while?
It's kind of mixed. What I'm seeing is a lot of the seniors are selling their big home and buying a condo here and a condo somewhere else where they can be a snowbird.
I see.
So, but they still, if they can, they still like to come back to New England for summers.
Yeah, and I noticed the proliferation of these over 55 condos now. We have a lot of these developments. I know in Lincoln there's a fairly large development. Smithfield has a couple, and they're ranch style.
A lot of South County is coming up with them too.
Yeah. People are going back to the ranches, and some of them are beautiful. They're almost like 3-bedroom ranches, only they're condominiums, and eliminates the stairs and such.
Yeah.
And I really think that's the wave of the future with the baby boomers retiring.
Yeah, I do too. And that's one of the reasons why people are selling their big homes, because they do have stairs.
I see. Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that, because my wife has been bugging me now, because we're not that we're of the age where we can't go up and down the stairs. We can, but it's a chore. It really is. You're up on the second floor, and the washer and dryer are down in the basement, and your socks are in the dryer, and then you run down 2 flights, and you run back up 2 flights, and you figure out, well, your shirt's hanging down there too, so you got to do this constant up and down the stairs. So I see that market as really a booming market, especially if you have even just a ranch house. It doesn't even have to be a condominium. I think there's a certain value for a ranch house. Are you seeing that as well?
Oh, I do. Yeah. I find my stairs always have things on them to go upstairs, so that when I go upstairs, I consolidate my trips.
Wow. Now, doing this, the paperwork has changed a lot since you started 30 years ago, obviously. What's the typical progression of paperwork that a normal buyer would have to go through, to go from making an offer all the way to closing the house? What's the first step?
The first thing they should do, even before they're contemplating making the offer, they should fill out a mandatory agency form, because that form obligates the agent that they're working with to confidentiality. If they don't sign that form, the agent that they're working with is not bound by confidentiality. So the first thing they should do when they meet with an agent, even if they're just interviewing them, is sign the mandatory agency form. And after that, there's all kinds of forms. There's the offer form, there's the seller's disclosure form that they should read thoroughly before they make the offer, so they know what they're getting, because what you're looking at and what's on that piece of paper are sometimes vastly different.
That's the Rhode Island law, right? The seller has to fill out a form if they're selling a property, and asks a bunch of questions.
6 pages of questions.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's supposed to be their representation of what the house is since they've owned it. So it's supposed to give the age of the roof and the condition of the heating system, the septic system if they have one, or a cesspool. It's important to know if you're buying something with a cesspool or a septic if you're in that area, because the Rhode Island law says that within 1 year, cesspools have to be converted to septics, and that's a big expense.
Yeah, that's something that you have to take in account for, especially if you have little to no money to put down on the house.
Exactly.
Now, the seller's, just a brief overview of the seller's disclosure. If I remember right, that law was passed in like 95 and 96, and before that, it was anything goes. So, the seller, if it rained the night before, we had a showing on a house, the seller, not every seller, obviously, but some sellers would magically have, something down in the basement covering the puddle, so to speak. But, you really want, right? You really want the sellers to be honest, because if they're not honest on that form, it's really going to come back and bite them later.
Well, it is, because that's the only form that gets the sellers in trouble. All the other forms get us in trouble as realtors. But that form, the buyers can go back on the seller if they knew something was wrong and they hid it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I did have one client go back on a seller because their house leaked right after they moved in, and the next door neighbors, to the point where they had to have the fire department come and pump it. And the next door neighbor said, "Oh, that happens every storm." And that had not been on the disclosure, and they were attorneys, and they went after the seller.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
yeah. So that form does get the sellers in trouble.
That's important. And you also mentioned the agency disclosure. What is agency basically? What's the concept of agency? Can you explain that to the audience?
Agency is how we're working for you, if we're working for you or with you. And years ago, in fact, even probably when I came in, agency wasn't that big a deal because we all work for the seller. And now...
Because the seller was paying the commission.
Exactly. And then along the way, buyer agency came into being. So now we can choose to work with the buyer or with the seller. If we have the listing, then our loyalties and all of that go to the seller. But if we're working with the buyer, the seller most often will be still paying us. Mm-hmm. But we work for the buyer, and we are supposed to get them the best deal, the best house, the best deal, and keep everything that they tell us confidential.
I see. So you're not. It's almost like an attorney-client privilege,
exactly,
whereby you only disclose the amount of information that the buyer or seller, depending on who your client is, mm-hmm. what they've allowed you to disclose.
Yes.
I've always found it, and you've probably run into this 1,000 times. When you show a house to someone, the first questions out of their mouth is usually, "Well, why are they selling?" And sometimes it's for personal reasons that really, are no one's business. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's just in general, and it's where they're moving to Florida, or they're retiring or whatever. But sometimes it's for real personal reasons, and it's really not up to the seller's agent to tell.
No,
right?
I typically say it's time for a move.
I see. Yeah.
I really don't. Even if it's just because they're moving to Florida, my pat answer is usually it's time for a move.
Wow.
Because people sometimes think if they're moving to Florida, they want to go quick. We can make a low offer.
Right.
And that doesn't come into the picture.
Right.
It doesn't mean if they're moving that they're going to take a lower offer.
Right.
They want what they want. They want what the house is worth. And it's our job, if we're representing the seller, to get them what the house is worth.
Sure.
Unless there are extenuating circumstances and we're allowed to tell. Sometimes the seller will give us permission.
I see.
But that's few and far between.
So an example of that, when you're representing either party, let's just hypothetically you're representing a buyer, and again, hypothetical, it's a $150,000 house, and they make a $130,000 offer on the house, and they say, "Well, Jeannie, we're going to offer $130,000, but I will go to $135,000 if need be, but we want to submit $130,000 right now." So that's the type of personal information we're talking about, right?
Exactly.
You're not going to run to the other side and say, "Hey, there's $130,000, but they'll take $135,000.
Right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's perfect.
I saw somebody on Facebook today that said they're putting a house on the market and how much they're putting it on for, and the next sentence said, "But there's room."
Oh, yeah.
So is anybody going to offer them full price with that comment?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and that really tells you where the fiduciary lies. Well, well, this is Real Estate Pro Talk, and we're here today with Jeannie Elson Gordon. Jeannie lives in North Smithfield. She's been a real estate broker for 30 years. And we're going to take a little commercial break, and we'll be right back.
Real Estate Pro Talk is a live radio talk show dedicated to educating its listeners on the entire spectrum of real estate matters. Part of the American dream is owning a home or investment property, or perhaps even becoming a real estate agent yourself. Paul Vanas and his team of real estate professionals have over 250 combined years of experience in the industry. In other words, we can make it happen for you. Why go down the road less traveled when we can put you directly on the real estate superhighway? Whether buying or selling in today's complicated real estate market, or if you just need advice about jumping into the real estate business for a career change, you'll need a decisive edge based on experience. Call Paul Vanas at 401-265-6144 for a free, no-obligation consultation. That's Paul Vanas at 401-265-6144. 888-265-6144.
And we are back to Real Estate Pro Talk. If anyone would like to call in and speak to Jeannie or myself, the number here at WOON is 401-766-1240, 401-766-1240. Now, Jeannie, you mentioned a couple of things, obviously, and it's very generic what we're talking about today. And when you meet with a buyer or seller, you school them, correct?
Yes.
In all of this information, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So they know right off the bat. They're not just meeting with you and then you're having them sign papers and they walk away. They know all about you and what your job is when you meet with them.
My first appointment with buyers is typically about an hour, where I explain the process, what's going to happen, how I work with them, why I work with them, and how I hope to manage to get their goals. And then we talk about the different ways that we can go about it. So, and they need to be approved for a mortgage, because what I don't want to do is take somebody out to look at a house they think they can afford, only to find out they can afford $75,000 less.
Right.
Because they're never going to find the house that they like when they've been looking too expensive.
Right, and it lets them down. It's really a downer. When you think about it, you're looking. It's like going to the car dealership, and my dad, one of his old lines was, you never try to sell a Cadillac on a Ford lot, because you're trying to sell what you specialize in, and they get disappointed, in the price range. Because I remember when I was looking for my first house, and not to bore the audience with stories, the difference between the house I ended up buying and the house we really, really wanted was like $7,000. And it was the difference between a brand new construction on a half acre as compared to a 40-year-old house on a little 5,000 square foot lot. And I just couldn't qualify for that extra $7,000 at the time. The mortgage people told me, we wish if you can get a gift or something. And I didn't have the ability to get a gift, but that was the difference in the qualifications, just $7,000. So. And
were you happy with that house that you moved in?
I was.
Okay.
We ended up meeting some nice lifelong friends as neighbors, and we did things. We had block parties and barbecues in the yard with everyone else in the neighborhood, and it ended up being really nice. But what are the typical pitfalls that, like, I know you do the right thing when you meet with a buyer and seller, and then you explain the business to them, but what are the typical pitfalls that a buyer or seller might fall into who doesn't meet someone like you?
Well, if you don't meet somebody and if you don't know their goals, you can't find the right house for them. So all you're doing is chasing people around and being a taxi or an Uber driver for them. Not that you're going to put them in your car, but you're going to be driving around time after time after time and trying to figure out why they're not making an offer when you're showing them all different kinds of houses and not exactly what they look for. When I meet with them, I give them 3 must-haves. Well, if you don't know what their 3 must-haves are, you can't meet it for them. I tell them they can have as many wants as possible, but only 3 must-haves, because I can get you 3. I can't get you 20. But if this week you're looking for the master bath, and next week you're looking for the gourmet kitchen, and the week after that you're looking for the family room with the fireplace, you're taking them to too many different types of homes.
Makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, and then they get discouraged, and they drop you, and after all the time that you've put in with them, they're off to another realtor doing the very same thing.
Right.
And then they get even more discouraged. Yeah. So I always tell agents that an hour in the conference room will cut out 6 weeks of looking.
Wow, that's important.
Yeah.
That's important.
And it's important to the buyers because you don't want them to get discouraged.
No.
Right now they're saying, well, if I don't have a house by Thanksgiving, I'm just going to wait until spring. Well, you don't want them to wait until spring. They want to be in by Thanksgiving.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And why wait? We can enjoy the benefits of it now by having the right. I remember a friend of mine who was in the business long before I got in the business, and he used to sell a house every Saturday afternoon. I won't mention his name, but he was a dear friend, and he was a master of knowing inventory. So people would come in his office on a Saturday morning, and he would do exactly what you just said. Tell me specifically the 3 or 4 things that were most important to you, and he'd write it down. And in his head, he was putting the puzzle pieces together, and then they'd get in the car. This was in the 70s, and it's a little different now.
We did drive
obviously.
them around then.
Right. And they'd get in the car, and he'd show them 2 or 3 houses in a row, which were the best fit for what they said they wanted us to have. And miraculously, and within a month and a half, waiting for the bank to go through with the mortgage, they had a house.
They had a house.
Because he was a good listener, 90%, talk 10% of the time and listen 90% of the time.
We do have 2 ears and 1 mouth. And,
Right.
We should listen more than we talk.
Exactly.
It isn't what we want them to buy. It's what they want to buy. And I will tell you, I have sold some pretty ugly houses, but they love them.
Right.
And they're still in them. And they're still happy. And it's been 15 years,
Imagine that. Yeah.
The criteria for that couple was if I liked it, I didn't show it to them, because they just had very, very definite taste, and it wasn't mine, but it was theirs, and you need to listen to what they want.
Do you find that people will buy a house for the same reasons over and over and over again? I know I've noticed that. Like if someone came to me and said, I'm a first-time buyer and I want I want a 2-family house, and I want to live in it for a few years and collect the rent and then go off and buy a single-family house. Well, when they call me to sell that house, the next buyer is looking for the same thing that first buyer was 10 years prior. There's like this repetitive cycle.
It is, because we're creatures of habit, and we do like the same things. I mean, there's an awful lot of people that like a 3-bedroom ranch. There's an awful lot of people that want the raised ranch. Right. There's a lot of people that don't want the raised ranch. Some buy by location, some buy by style of home. Twice I've sold to a person that didn't want to see neighbors. She wanted to be the last house on the street or way set back, because she didn't want to see her neighbors, didn't want to see their house, didn't want them to drive by her house. Well, that was a very difficult find. But she's very happy in that house. I found it twice.
Imagine that.
Yeah, I hope she doesn't move again. But there are people that want the 3-bedroom ranch because it's convenient. Everybody's on the same level, and they can see what the kids are doing. And there's a lot to be said for that when you're a young family.
Right.
It's
like the houses on main roads. Everyone would say, well, why would you want to live on a main road, with the traffic? But the main road houses sell. No one's abandoning their main road houses.
Right.
So there's an adjustment there. I find, especially now, people are going back to where people congregate. I mean, in the 80s, it was get out to the suburbs, 10, 12, 15 miles outside of Providence. And now I find some of my clients are going back to where they came from way back when, with the neighbors right next door, right on the bus line, and, a walk from a store. And so the demographic, I think, is changing a little bit.
We are changing. And I think a lot of that has to do with, as we age, we don't want to do so much driving. So we go where everything is convenient.
Absolutely.
So...
Yeah, you're listening to Real Estate Pro Talk, and my name is Paul Vanas. Today we have Jeannie Elson-Gordon. Jeannie's been around a long time in the real estate business, sold hundreds of houses for over the period of years, and done consulting work. You've done. You're a teacher. You've represented my school in teaching pre-licensees in the
I
business.
love it.
That's great, because you have to be an adult. To teach adult classes is very different from teaching, younger people, right? You really have to teach to the test, because they've been out of the education arena for a while, and they've worked a long, hard day, and they come, at night to take a night class in real estate to get their license, and then here you are.
Yeah.
Right?
Quite honestly, what I teach in the pre-licensing class is not the most exciting stuff.
Right.
It's really, I would say it's boring. But it's stuff they need to know. It's the basics of real estate. It's not a lot of what they're going to use when they get out in the real estate business, but it's the basics that they need to know in order to keep themselves out of trouble as they practice real estate.
So let's shift over to that right now. What does someone have to do if they're listening to this broadcast and they say, I want another opportunity to make some money for my family, or I want to do a career, perform a career change. What's the typical procedure?
Well, the first thing they need to do is make sure they take a 45-hour class, a boring class with somebody like me, because Rhode Island requires them to take a 45-hour class in real estate and Rhode Island law. And that sets them up to take the exam, 2 exams, the national exam and the Rhode Island exam, and they need to pass that. 70 is passing. You're not going to be told what your grade is unless you get 100. And I don't see any need to get 100 just to find out what your grade is. You need to pass. And it's a difficult test. So teaching that class I think is very important, because I have to get into them the important stuff that will be on the test.
And it's a difference of teaching too. There's a difference in the style and manner of teaching, because most of these are night classes, right?
Yeah, and they're hungry because they're coming from another job,
Right.
and the classes start at 6. So if they're on their way home from another class, a lot of times they'll bring something to eat in the class, and that distracts other people. But it's necessary; they can't go
Even
without.
though you give them water and candy, I notice.
Yeah, I do. The candy keeps them going because they've been working all day.
Right.
And you keep the room a little cool because you don't want them to fall asleep on you.
Right.
And you drill them. You just go, this is important. Know this for the exam. And the exam is hard, and they get discouraged because it's a very difficult. I don't know if I could pass the exam now. Mm-hmm. I mean, I took it 30 years ago and I passed it, but it's evolved over the years, and I don't know that I could pass the exam first time now.
Yeah.
It's that difficult.
Well, and two, I think the exam now tries to cover every base where, many years ago when it evolved, it evolved into something that was just real estate, and then we've gotten into fair housing, and we've gotten into financing, and there's all these other subjects that are now part of that environmental
ADA,
stuff. Yeah,
lead paint,
exactly.
Cesspools and septic, environmental. I mean, figuring out what wetlands are.
Right.
When I was a kid, I didn't know when I was picking blackberries that I was in a wetlands. My feet never got wet.
Right.
I didn't see any wetlands around, but now I have to teach them that blueberries and blackberries grow in wetlands.
Right.
So it really has evolved. When you and I took the exam, it was more common sense in what we had grown up with. Now it's a whole lot of different stuff.
But when I took the exam, they took a needle and they stuck it in my
Did
thumb.
you know?
And if the blood was red, they patted you on the back and they said, you start on Monday.
But after they take the exam and pass, and they will, they start the steps to actually get their license.
Wow.
And they need to take a lead class. They need an agency class. Agency I teach in my class, but lead they need to take after the class is over. And they have to get a BCI done. And once they get all their paperwork together and swear that their income taxes are paid, both federal and state, then they can submit to DBR to have their license issued.
I see. So there's a series of events, and of course it sounds a lot worse than it really is, like everything else in life. So you take it one step at a time. So you take the 45-hour class, and you're testing them during the class time, right?
We had
you're
the
preparing
midterm
them,
last night, yes.
You're preparing them for the ultimate test. And then they eventually take a final with you before they go take the actual state test, correct?
Exactly.
And the state
And the
test.
reason I give them the midterm and the final is because as they're going through the chapters with me, it's like, oh, this is easy, this is easy, this is easy. But when they look at the test and they don't have the book open, it's like, oh, I had one that, I mean, he's going to pass, he's going to do great. But last night he walked out and he went, well, I better go home and study. So,
right.
And that's really why I do the midterm and the final, because you need that eye-opener.
Yeah.
So-
And then, of course, from there, assuming they pass the test and they take the lead class, and the state of Rhode Island sends them a little certificate in the mail, congratulating them on their efforts, it's time to get teamed up with a company, correct?
Exactly. Well, actually, they need to team up with a company before they submit, because it's going to depend on how they're going to buy their E&O. Some of the smaller companies, that you need to get your own E&O, and the larger companies have a blanket E&O. So you don't want to buy your own E&O because they don't refund it.
I see.
So you really need to know where you're going before you submit to DBR.
So DBR won't send you the license until you have some sort of verification that you've bought errors and omissions insurance to make sure that, just in case something goes wrong, to protect the consumer, right?
Exactly.
But once you have that in place, then it's a matter of teaming up with a company that, if you're new, training, I'm sure, is the big
Training
thing.
is big because otherwise you're just thrown to the wolves and you sit there and you don't know what to do. And so I really think training is very important, not because I do it, but I do. But I do think it's very important to pair up with somebody that's experienced so that you can see the steps that happens. You can have somebody to shadow or have somebody shadow you. If you take off right away, then you need somebody that's going to go with you and say, okay, you did this and you should have done that. Or you might want to try this the next time.
I see.
But a lot of times I'll have new agents shadow me, especially on home inspections and appraisals and things like that, because you don't know what to do.
Right.
And
So it's like anything else.
Yeah.
It's like me in front of this radio board here. It's your first time out. You're just lost, and then with time, it becomes second nature.
exactly.
That's great information. So let's do this. Let's take another short commercial break, and then we will be back with Jeannie Olson-Gordon.
Real Estate Pro Talk is a live radio talk show dedicated to educating its listeners on the entire spectrum of real estate matters. Part of the American dream is owning a home or investment property, or perhaps even becoming a real estate agent yourself. Paul Vanas and his team of real estate professionals have over 250 combined years of experience in the industry. In other words, we can make it happen for you. Why go down the road less traveled when we can put you directly on the real estate superhighway? Whether buying or selling in today's complicated real estate market, or if you just need advice about jumping into the real estate business for a career change, you'll need a decisive edge based on experience. Call Paul Vanas at 401-265-6144 for a free, no-obligation consultation. That's Paul Vanas at 401-265-6144.
Okay, we are back to Real Estate Pro Talk on this beautiful Friday fall afternoon. I was just out in Burrillville showing a piece of property, and the smell of the leaves, when the leaves have that smell when they've gotten a little bit wet, it was you open the door and that hits you in the face, and it was kind of nice because I hadn't smelled that in a while, or at least I haven't recognized it in a while. So where that time of year again, fall is my favorite time of the year.
I love fall too.
It's beautiful. The air is crisp in the morning, and all kinds of things going on. But well, let's talk about the business a little bit, and we encourage our listeners to, if you do want to call us for information, either now on the air at 401-766-1240 or after the fact. My cell phone is 401-265-6144. You can call me, and we can kind of guide you through the real estate education process, because I mentioned we have a school. And Jeannie teaches the school and does a very good job. You got a real high success rate in the agents passing the test.
I'm very proud of that.
Which is wonderful, because it is a little difficult. It's especially if you're an adult, because you've been working for a few years, and the time is limited in your life. So as Jeannie mentioned, it's not too easy to go back to night school for a couple of times a week for 6 weeks and earn your 45 hours. But I'm sure we can get you through it and get you up and running and successful by giving you the right information. So again, you can call me anytime at the conclusion of the program at 401-265-6144. Let's talk a little bit, Jeannie, about the diversity. Well, actually, before that, you've walked us through the steps of getting the license, and now a person has their license. They go to work for a company. Usually, and I know it's tough to answer this question, but usually the first year in the business, how many houses can a person sell?
I think it depends on how well they work. I always tell people to contact their sphere of influence, which really is, when you begin, it's if there was a family wedding, who would you invite? because those are the people that
great.
know you and like you and want to see you succeed. So your job in the beginning is to let as many people as possible know that you've done this and you have a license and you want to sell. And it's also important to tell them that you're not going to hound them to buy and sell, but you are going to ask that they listen in their office and with their friends and family, for people that give the little clues that there's a house to be purchased or sold, and then they recommend you. So I think in the first year, it's kind of like they should expect to do maybe one every 2 months. And if they can do one a month, that's great.
Right.
But it's if you work by referral, if you work with your family, it's going to depend on how well your family, you've got to train your family and friends to listen for you.
I see.
Use their ears, because that's really how I've done my business all along. I've done it by referral, and I've done it by asking people to refer me. Right. And I deliver a ton of pies at Thanksgiving. It's my one big thing. It's my thank you to all my clients. Wow. Because I put the sticker right on the package. I mean, I've got a wonderful woman in Rehoboth that makes fantastic pies. But I also put the sticker right on that it's the season to give thanks for great clients.
Wow.
And I find that after I deliver the pies, they start remembering that I'm a realtor.
Isn't that great?
So it's important that you let people know. You can't be a secret agent.
Right.
You've got to get out there. Knocking on doors and cold calling is not my thing.
You have to promote yourself. It's just like any other business.
Yeah.
A regular business has commercials and billboards and all those other good things. So we basically have to do the same thing in a different way.
Yeah. And billboards and commercials cost a lot of money.
Absolutely.
A handwritten note saying, I want to let you know that I got a real estate license and I'm hoping you can help me. And that's a note card and a stamp.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because there's always someone looking to buy or sell. I mean, we live in a commodity business because not only is it a commodity business financially, but it's also a business whereby it's a necessity. Because let's face it, we only have in life two choices other than living in a tent. You either rent or you buy.
And if you rent, you're paying somebody else's mortgage.
Right.
So why not pay your own?
Right. Makes sense.
People that own houses have a much higher value of retirement value when they do retire, because they've got a house with equity for the most part.
And they can enjoy the property.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I found, like, I remember I've had some agents who were having a hard time in the beginning, that I've trained years ago, and they come to me and say, oh, Paul, it's just not clicking. And I asked them exactly what you just said. How many people did you talk to this week? And they say, well, maybe like none. Well, that's the reason why nothing's happening for you. That secret agent effect. You can't be a secret agent.
Right.
But at the same time, I agree with you. You don't want to be that in-law that just got into the insurance business and he's trying to sell you life insurance at Thanksgiving and at Christmas and at Easter and everything else.
You want people to take your calls. You don't want them to go, oh, no.
Well, how, explain that to us. How is the typical agent trained? Let's say someone's listening to this show today. They get their license. They go through the testing. They paid the fees. And, well, speaking of fees, you can get into the real estate business for under $1,000.
You can. It's the cheapest way to go into business that I know of.
Right.
You do have expenses afterwards, but to actually get into a business, you don't need to rent a place. You don't need to buy a lot of equipment. Your cell phone and a computer. That's it.
Yeah, that's really an opportunity to start from ground zero with little or no, very little money down.
It's your time that you need to put in the beginning, and you need to be religious about spending the time. You can't get up in the morning and go, oh, I don't have any appointments. You've got to go, okay, I need to make appointments, because it's amazing. Right. The more I work, the luckier I get.
Absolutely. Now, of course, if you're working a full-time job and your goal is to make the transition from, part-time agent, real estate agent to full-time real estate agent, you're going to have to build up your sales to the point where you can make that
do that,
transition,
yeah.
and it won't financially hurt you unless you have a rich uncle who's just going to write you a
Right.
check or something. But I've seen hundreds of agents make that transition over the years from part-time to full-time.
Yep.
And it's not easy. It's like any other business.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of work, but
It means you work on your off hours.
Right.
So if you work a 9 to 5 job, you're making phone calls at 7 to 8 at night, letting people know what you're doing, and you're doing networking. You're getting out to the networking events, socializing, not so much for the drinks, but for the hi, this is me.
Right.
I'm in real estate now. You know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wow. Now, once that's done, what kind of training, or every company is probably different.
Every company is different.
Yeah, but what is the boilerplate training that an agent should expect when they sign up with a real estate company to work for them?
You should expect that the company has some kind of plan to educate you as to how to work with a buyer and how to work with a seller and how to fill out the forms. And you should expect them to have somebody that can work with you by mentoring you. When you have a mentor, it means giving up a little bit of your commission, because typically the mentor gets part of, a very little part of, but part of.
That's only fair. I mean,
Well, yeah, because the mentor is giving up time and going on home inspections with you, and even going on appointments, sitting in on your first appointment with your buyer, which is it's an hour, and then they sit with you afterwards and explain why they said what they said, and
I see.
that kind of stuff. So it's time consuming, but you should expect the company should help you to succeed.
I see.
It's only in the company's best interest, because if you just hang your license there and don't do anything, they're not getting anything out of it either.
Exactly.
They want you to succeed so that they succeed.
So the company, someone who's already experienced in the company will basically hand-holding, for lack of a better term, mentoring, or whatever you want to call it. They'll guide you through the process. They go on your first few showings with you, or your first few listings, listing presentations with you.
Yeah.
Okay, and then at some point you break away like the bird in the springtime,
Right.
flies out of the nest, right?
I usually go on listing appointments and I tell them you're on, and if I see you faltering, I'll jump in, and then you need to jump in when you get your confidence back.
Makes sense.
But you can just see them all of a sudden, I'm done. I don't know what else to say.
Right.
And so if you have somebody with you that can jump in and make it smooth,
Right.
like it was meant to be like that.
Absolutely. And it's funny you mentioned that, because I just had a flashback. You're always afraid whenever you start anything new of either doing the wrong thing or not having the answer. And it took me a long time to get over that. And just basically, if I didn't have the answer, I tell people I don't know.
But I'll find out.
But I'll find out. Give me an hour, give me a day, and I'll have more information on this subject than you'll ever want to know. But it's tough to look someone in the eye, because we tend to naturally, our ego gets in the way a little bit, and we don't want to offend, and we don't want to appear that they know more than us, and so on and so forth. But I think the person that and I'm not going to call it self-deprecation, but the person who acknowledges that, the client that acknowledges that you don't know everything, but you're willing to take time out of your day to find out for them, is very important. I think that's how loyalty is built.
I definitely think that's how loyalty is formed,
Yeah.
and that's how they are willing to refer up their family and friends to you, because they have the confidence that they know you're not going to just make up an answer.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. Wow. Interesting stuff. We're talking today with Jeannie Elson Gordon, and this is Real Estate Pro Talk. We're going to take another commercial break, and we will be back.
Real Estate Pro Talk is a live radio talk show dedicated to educating its listeners on the entire spectrum of real estate matters. Part of the American dream is owning a home or investment property, or perhaps even becoming a real estate agent yourself. Paul Vanas and his team of real estate professionals have over 250 combined years of experience in the industry. In other words, we can make it happen for you. Why go down the road less traveled when we can put you directly on the real estate superhighway? Whether buying or selling in today's complicated real estate market, or if you just need advice about jumping into the real estate business for a career change, you'll need a decisive edge based on experience. Call Paul Vanas at 401-265-6144 for a free, no-obligation consultation. That's Paul Vanas at 401-265-6144.
And we are back. We have about 9 minutes left, and thank you, Jeannie, for being here today. So, we've talked about a variety of subjects today. We've kind of covered the rough outline of agency and how you should, be loyal to your customers and keep their and clients and keep their information, private. And I'm sure there are listeners out there saying right now, boy, I don't know if my agent did that when I bought my house, because we all bump into certain people every day. And then, of course, we talked about a little bit of how to get into the real estate business. And I'm not sure every listener who's listening to this broadcast today actually wants to run out of their house and come down and sign up to get into the real estate business. But it's always nice to know the process, because like anything else in life, we learn how to do something, and many times it's not as hard as we think it is, basically. Right. But I was always fascinated by real estate, because once you get your license in the business, there's so many other facets of the business. Let's say you don't like the sales portion of real estate. You don't like going out at night and driving around open houses on weekends. Appraising, you can become an appraiser. Yeah,
appraising is a very good business, especially if you want to be an at-home parent, because there's very little time that you have to actually go out, and you can schedule that so that you have daycare for the number of days that you're going to go out and actually look at the houses for appraising them or do your town hall work. But a lot of it is done at home on your computer, and you can be home with your little kids.
Absolutely. You can control your time a little better. The income probably isn't as vigorous as actually being on the sales side, but you can control it. And of course, the licensing for appraising is a different venue. Most people make the transition from sales into appraising rather than from appraising to sales. It's been my experience anyway. And of course, there's property management, right?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of people go into property management. A lot of realtors actually do property management in addition to doing the sales, because it's a steady stream of income for them.
So an example of a property manager was you have someone who has a multifamily house. I have a 5-unit house, let's say, and I don't want to collect the rent anymore, and I don't want to every time the tenant calls with a problem or something is broken or whatever, we hire the property manager to do that, and the property manager gets a fee to do that.
Exactly.
And it takes a certain personality of person, obviously, to be an effective property manager.
Yeah.
I know some people who are very, very good at property management because they know a little bit about construction, and they know, because they've had a real estate license, they know, on the sales end, and it makes it easy for them to get things done.
Yep.
And then, of course, in an investment property, if someone's not paying their rent, obviously it's time for that tenant to leave.
Eviction.
Right, time for the eviction. So the landlord that doesn't want to get involved in that anymore, or doesn't want to get involved at all, that's a nice opportunity for them to take in the real estate business. Of course, there's private consulting.
Yeah. And to be honest with you, now that the baby boomers are coming of age, and they do need consulting. They don't know what they want to do. And sometimes you need to sit and help them decide it really is time to sell that house. You really can't take care of it,
Are they buying? I mean, do you see a lot of the baby boomers buying?
Yeah, because, I'm a baby boomer, and look at the color of my hair.
Yeah.
For the others who can't see it, it's white. But yeah, it's time for us to decide if we want that big house still, or if we want to do something else. But making that decision is hard. So having an outside person come in to the house and tell you what it's worth and how you can move forward and achieve your goal of moving south but still staying here if your kids are here, it's very helpful.
Yeah, so the baby boomers, that age group from 1946, they were born in 46 to maybe 64, I guess is the range. They came up 30, 40 years ago, and yeah, they still need a place to live. So,
Yeah.
they're either going to scale down or scale up. It's funny. I have a relative of mine that when she was 70, she went out and bought a 4-bedroom, 3-bath home. And there were those of us in the family thought she was crazy. And one day I saw her and I asked her, why did you do this? And she said, because I always wanted this house.
There you go.
I've had visions of this house for 30 years, and I finally have it. And I said, well, but you don't use any of the bedrooms. And she said, I don't care.
Exactly.
So it's a personal, it's a personal decision. And then of course you have, you can get into other things like expert witness testimony. My company performs expert witness testimony for the courts and zoning board hearings and planning board hearings, and of course you have to have a few years experience under your belt to have a credible resume for that. But that is another means of getting an income from the real estate business, which starts off with the real estate license.
Right.
Now, Jeannie, you have we got a couple of minutes left. You have a class going on right now for pre-license.
I do.
And you're in about halfway?
Halfway.
Halfway.
Yep, we are halfway through. They'll be done before Halloween.
And the students are receptive.
They're very good. This is a great class. I'm thoroughly enjoying this one.
Wow.
There's 19 in the class.
Nice.
And they've all had some way, shape, or form some real estate questions or experience.
Yep.
And they're very willing to share and ask questions, and therefore it's an informative class.
Wow. And what's the average age of just offhand,
I think I've got one person that's in her 60s, but other than that, I would say they're mid-30s to mid-40s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's actually younger than I thought. So
I've got some that are planning to slowly do real estate in the hopes of being able to retire early.
wow. So the mid-30s people, they I would think from an education point of view, they're still pretty sharp, because let's face it, they've only been out of school a few years, whereas someone who's 50 or 60, it's been a long time since they've sat in a classroom. And you have to do they need any special attention that you find, the older folks or the older agents?
They're the ones that tend to stay after and ask me questions that they won't ask in front of other people.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right. Yeah, so they still call the basement the rumpus room, and
Yeah.
sitting out on the piazza instead of the porch. Okay, wow, that's great. Well, in closing, are you optimistic about the market? I mean, you're out there every day.
I'm very optimistic about it.
That's great.
I think there's always somebody that's going to buy or sell, and I think we're in a very good market right now, and the interest rates are extremely low, and I think it's a great time for people to buy.
No, and the phones are ringing, obviously.
Phones are ringing. Yeah.
And people are contacting you, I'm sure, by all different means, social media, and
Oh yeah.
yeah, you get.
That's my challenge. I've got to get with the times.
Right.
I'm pretty good with Facebook, but the kids don't use Facebook, so I've got to learn Instagram.
Wow. That's great. Well, we're just about winding down here, and we want to thank you for listening today. You've been listening to Real Estate Pro Talk. My name is Paul Vanas, and hopefully I'll be here every Friday afternoon with you from 3 to 4 p.m. and we're going to talk nothing but real estate. And we have invited guests who are the best in the business and the best in their craft. So and next week we're going to talk about home inspections and what home inspectors look for when they're representing their clients, and to make sure that the buyer gets the house that they expect to get. So, having said that, I thank you for listening, and we will talk to you next week. And again, my number is 401-265-6144. Thank you.